Hello, everyone. Tonight, we are stepping into a place where the sun forgets to blink, where even the wind seems to carry the size of creatures that haven't walked the earth in tens of millions of years. It's dry, endless, and very quiet until it's not. Sand swirls without permission, slicing the air like paper cuts, and every ridge of rock seems to murmur a name no one remembers. You're not walking into an ordinary desert. You're trespassing on what might be the most haunted stretch of land this planet ever made, the place where dinosaurs came to die and stayed. You probably won't survive, of course. Not because of toothy predators or falling rocks, but because this place drains you. Not just your sweat, your thoughts, your sense of direction, your belief that time ever moved forward. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is, because over here, the clock's been broken for 95 million years. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started tonight. You shuffle along a shallow slope of dust, each step whispering across a surface made of ancient tragedies. The sand is hot enough to blister your ankles if your boots fail, but that's not what stops you. What stops you is the shape beneath your feet. A twisted bone fragment poking from the soil like the corner of a hidden memory. It's smooth, sun-bleached and humming. Not literally humming, but you know that kind of silence that feels like it's holding its breath. Yeah, that kind. You kneel, brushing away the dust. It's a rib, long and curved, probably from something that once needed a lot of lung to scream. You don't say that out loud. Above you, vultures circle, not the modern kind, but in your mind you imagine something older, larger, more arrogant. This desert, once part of what we now call North Africa, wasn't always dry. Millions of years ago, it was a lush floodplain tangled with forests, rivers, and life, but not anymore. Now it's called the Sahara, and it covers about 3.6 million square miles. And under all that sand ghosts, real ghosts in a sense, fossils, bones, imprints, shadows of creatures whose names are still being argued over in air-conditioned conference rooms. You know the drill. Paleontologists find a claw, give it a 13-letter name, and then argue about it for 20 years. Some people argue for a living. Must be nice. The heat waves shimmer ahead of you like the desert's trying to hide something with a cheap illusion trick. But you're not buying it. You've seen enough mirages to know this one's real, half a femur sticking out of a dune like a gravestone that's lost its inscription. Historians still debate whether this entire region dried up suddenly or slowly choked over millennia. Some say a shift in the African monsoon 7 million years ago began the death of the wet age. Others think volcanic changes and continental drift did it faster than anyone expected. Either way, it turned lakes into sand traps, forests into open graves. You squint into the distance and spot something unusual, a perfectly straight ridge of white, maybe 30 feet long. You walk closer. It's not a ridge, it's a tail. Segmented vertebrae, each one larger than a loaf of bread baked and cracked under the sun for longer than your entire species has existed. You stand there towing the edge of time. This tail belonged to a sauropod, probably Paralateton, the tidal giant. It used to drag these bones through mangroves the way you drag shopping carts through parking lots. Now it's just another collection of silent punctuation marks in the sand. A light breeze kicks up. That's when you hear it, a low whistle like someone exhaling just behind your shoulder. You turn, of course. Nothing. Just dust. That's how it gets you. The desert doesn't scare you with roars, it scares you by remembering. You sit for a moment, brushing more sand off the bones. Your fingers tremble a little, but you blame the heat. Not the feeling that someone is watching you, definitely the heat. Here's a weird fact to cool you down. The Sahara still has freshwater springs bubbling under the surface. Hidden aquifers, silently flowing beneath your feet, nourishing nothing. Makes you think, doesn't it? Even ghosts need a drink. The wind shifts again. A new shape begins to rise from the sand nearby, as if the ground is exhaling a story. More bones. An arm? No. A wing? Thin finger-like supports stretched out collapsed. This one could have flown, or at least glided. A pterosaur, maybe even one of the giant Ajdar kids, the kind that could look a giraffe in the eye and still win the staring contest. You feel like you're standing in a museum where the exhibits are still being exhumed. Only there's no glass, no velvet rope, just time, and heat, and you. Somewhere behind you, the wind begins to play with the dunes, a long hiss like a chorus warming up before a symphony of silence. You glance up and realize your own footprints are already disappearing behind you. That's how fast this place forgets you. You don't belong here. Nothing does anymore. But the bones stay. That's the rule of deserts. They burn the flesh, bury the soft, and keep what's sharp and stubborn. And the air. It smells like sunburned salt and silence. Like something old enough to know better, but still choosing to watch. As you walk deeper into the heat, your shadow lengthens behind you, but just barely. Midday sun high and merciless, no shade, no clouds, just you and bones on a breeze. You keep walking and the ground changes under your boots. Less powdery now, more compact. Cracked, like a dried-up tongue that hasn't spoken in a few million years. The bones aren't as obvious here, but the prints are. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. A fossilized parade of footprints frozen mid-step, mid-turn, mid-run. Like some terrible game of musical chairs ended without warning and no one got a seat. You crouch to look closer. 3 toes, long-clawed, the kind that belonged to something that hunted or got hunted. You follow them one step at a time. They veer sharply to the left, then split. One set continues, the other doubles back. You imagine the scene: a startled herd. A predator too eager, the chaos of instinct. It happened here right where you're standing. You just missed it by, let's say, 94 million years. That's the funny thing about deserts. They kill in the present, but they preserve the past with the precision of a librarian. You'll find what they feared, what they fled, what they were, but never what they meant. The footprints stretch across what used to be mud, now hardened into pale rock. Once upon a time, this was a floodplain, sticky, squelching, noisy with bugs and bellows. Now it's silent. You hear the crunch of your steps like firecrackers in a cathedral. A little farther on, you find something stranger. Smaller prints skittering between the larger ones. Fast, frenzied, possibly a lizard. Or an early mammal scampering between the legs of beasts that didn't even notice. It makes you smile. Some things never change, life still hides in the shadows. Historians still debate whether these prints belong to a known species. Some claim they match Carcharodontosaurus, the shark-toothed lizard, a predator longer than a bus. Others say the spacing's off, that it's a new theropod entirely, a regional cousin, or something we haven't named yet because it never left anything but prints, no bones. Just footsteps like an echo with no voice. You trail the prints to a sudden drop in the terrain. The fossilized mud ends in a sharp edge like the land just gave up. And below that sand layered in striations of time. You're standing on the fossil equivalent of a crime scene, and the tape hasn't even been put up yet. Odd fact break. Did you know that dinosaur footprints are often more common than their bones? You'd think skeletons would be the main relic. But nope. Turns out it's easier to leave your mark in the mud than in the fossil record. Story of every middle child ever. You ease your way down boots sliding against ancient time. Down here, the sand swirls slower. More respectful. The prints don't follow you. Whatever left them stayed up there frozen in decision. Here you find your first real moment of quiet. Not just soundless, but still. The kind of quiet that comes after a scream or maybe just before one. You pause, tilt your head. Nothing. No wind, no animals, no planes overhead. You're deep in the nowhere now. Then something clicks, literally. A small pop in the rocks ahead. You crouch, wait. There it is again. A rock expanding under the heat. Probably, or more poetically, the ground shifting as it tries to forget the shape of a dying age. You walk toward it and find the edge of another print. This one is deep, ridiculously deep. The weight that pressed it must have been immense. Your eyes trace the curve of the heel, the fan of toes. Sauropod again? Maybe. But this one's weird. It's hesitant. Not part of a walk, but a pause. Like the animal stopped, planted one foot, and listened. You try it. Plant your foot in the same angle, the same space. You listen. And you hear it, the long, hollow rush of wind returning. Like a sigh, like an apology. Above you, the sky simmers. Heat waves melt the horizon into a slow liquid shimmer. You blink, and for a split second swear you see a tail flick, just at the edge of vision, gone before you can turn your head. It's the footprints. They mess with you. They're the closest thing we have to time travel, but they don't take you back. They bring the past forward, drag it by the toes, and leave it blinking in your peripheral vision. You sit beside the deepest one, running your fingers along the ridges. A little piece of it flakes off in your hand. You hold it up. It's just rock, sandstone, and memory. But you feel like you've just held hands with something that forgot it was dead. The light is starting to change. Shadows stretch longer now. The bones are beginning to glow, not literally, of course, but in that way, white things do in late sun. You decide to rest here a moment. Let the prints tell their stories, even if they've forgotten the endings. As you close your eyes, one last thought drifts in. Somewhere in this desert, there's a print that overlaps with another. Predator over prey, or prey over parent. Maybe even a meteorite fragment that landed in the wrong era. Because time doesn't stack neatly out here. It slides. It folds. Sometimes it trips over itself and leaves a mark. You exhale. The desert exhales with you, and for a moment, just one, you think the print beneath your boot is warm. The heat hits different today. Not like yesterday's dry ache or the sting of sunburn. Today, the desert feels like it's actively trying to erase you. Like every breath you take is borrowed. The air has weight too heavy, too still. You stop walking and the sweat doesn't evaporate. It just clings. So do your clothes. So does the silence. You shuffle toward a low ridge and find a rock to sit on. It's warm but not unbearable. You've sat on worse. Your fingers drift over the surface, coarse sandstone. But underneath, if you really press, it's smoother. Something was buried here. Maybe still is. The view stretches flat and cruel in every direction. No trees, no shade. The closest cloud is a pale smear on a sky that doesn't believe in mercy. The kind of sky that watched entire species dry out and didn't blink. You take a sip from your canteen. The water's warm, tastes like rust and disappointment. Then the wind shifts and you smell it. It's faint, but it's real. A scent that shouldn't exist out here. Rot. Old dried rot? Like something that died and tried very hard to turn into stone, but didn't quite make it. Your brain knows it's probably sulfur or minerals reacting to the heat. Your imagination, that's having a much worse day. You walk toward the smell. Because of course you do. Bad decisions built every good fossil find. The ground gets uneven, cracked like a jigsaw puzzle with missing pieces. You hop across it following a faint depression in the earth. At first you think it's a dried-out animal trail. Then you realize it's too wide, too deliberate. It's a path, or it was. You follow it into a shallow basin ringed by sunburned boulders. In the middle lies a scatter of bones fused together by sediment and time. They're warped, twisted, not shattered like a predator kill site. More like they collapsed, upright. Like the creature just gave up standing. You kneel beside what was once a thigh bone. It's cracked lengthwise like it dried from the inside out. You've seen this before. Signs of rapid desiccation. a creature dying slowly in heat so intense that even scavengers gave up waiting. And here's the real horror: this isn't some freak event. This was common. Around 93 million years ago, this area, what we now call the Cenomanian Sahara, went through one of the hottest sustained droughts in Earth's history. Temperatures soared, rain stopped, rivers dried, ecosystems blinked out one after the other. Even the giant plant eaters, the living bulldozers of the dinosaur world, started to vanish. Historians still debate whether the cause was volcanic activity, continental shifts, or global sea level changes. Honestly, it was probably all three. A combo meal of disaster. You stand in the basin squinting at the horizon and imagine the herds, paralititans moving in slow motion, their skin cracking under the sun. Theropods trailing behind not to hunt, but because they were too weak to lead. Giant crocodilians roasting in what used to be riverbeds, stranded like fish in a frying pan. Even the flying ones, the pterosaurs, circling lower and lower, searching for thermals that didn't rise anymore. You blink and it's gone. Just dunes and the sound of wind trying to mind its own business. You crouch to look at the skull fragments. There's something desperate in the jaw, wide open, tongue bone arched, as if the creature died mid-gasp. You whisper, "Yeah, same." Here's a weird fact to lighten the mood. Camels are technically better at surviving desert heat than most dinosaurs would have been. Their nostrils close, their blood cools their brain directly, and they can lose 25% of their body weight in water without dying. Makes you wonder who's really winning the evolutionary game. Hint: it's not the guy melting in hiking boots. You check your map, but it's useless. Landmarks shift. Shadows lie. You rely instead on that ancient explorer. Instinct: keep walking downhill until something stops you. Hopefully not a cliff or a mirage of an air-conditioned diner. You crest another dune, and it opens into a shallow valley. The floor is littered with what looks like driftwood but isn't. Bone. Hundreds of pieces. You step carefully, not wanting to crunch anything important. Though really, it's all important out here. These aren't kill remains. This is a graveyard. Maybe not a literal one. No dinosaur set up tombstones, but a place where they fell together. Some scientists call these mass mortality sites. Entire herds dying within days of each other. The kind of scene that says the world ended here, just not all at once. You kneel beside a cluster of vertebrae that look like giant white coins, stacked and melted slightly at the edges. They shimmer with mineral salt. You can smell the ancient riverbed that used to be here. Mud, algae, fish, all turned to vapor, all left behind these pieces of anatomy too stubborn to vanish. You place your palm on the bones. The sun has made them hot, like they still remember blood. The wind picks up again, curling through the boulders with a soft hiss. You can almost hear it say, "They waited for rain that never came." That's the cruelest part. Dinosaurs didn't just die here, they waited. They hoped. Their instincts told them the water would return. It always had, and for millions of years it did. Until it didn't. You step back, scanning the valley one last time. You see a partial rib cage, a bent forelimb, a tail curled like a question mark. So many shapes, all frozen mid-final act. Like nature paused the scene and walked out of the theater. You adjust your hat, wipe your forehead, and keep walking as the heat rises behind you like a second sun. The ground beneath you changes again, less shattered, more packed. A subtle difference, like walking from a burned-out house into the hollow echo of an abandoned temple. The silence doesn't lift, but it shifts. It feels reverent now, cautious. You've stumbled into what used to be sacred, the dried bones of an ancient river. You wouldn't know it just by looking. The riverbed doesn't announce itself with curves or silver glints. It's flat, dust-caked, and fossil-stained. But if you close your eyes, you can almost feel it. A rhythm, a pulse beneath your soles. Long ago, this place flowed with thick, muddy water, the kind that dragged trees, stirred crocodiles, and left footprints that hardened into time. You lower yourself beside a ripple mark in the stone, barely raised but still stubborn after tens of millions of years. You trail your fingers across it. It's exactly like the ripples at the bottom of a creek. Same pattern, just older, more patient. The Sahara once held some of the most complex freshwater systems on the planet. Back when it wasn't a desert, but a patchwork of deltas and floodplains, this region teemed with life. Not just dinosaurs, but giant turtles, lungfish the size of Labrador retrievers, and croc-like beasts that didn't bother hiding. They just opened their jaws and waited. One such croc, Sarcosuchus imperator, also known as the super croc. It stretched 40 feet long and weighed 8 tons. Its skull alone was longer than most cars. You stand here imagining it sliding silently through the reed's jaw's wide tail like a battleship rudder. You'd like to believe you could outrun it. You couldn't. Not unless you had a speedboat and a head start. There's something odd nearby flat ovals half embedded in the rock. You lean in and realize they're scales. Fossilized maybe from a fish or a tail. You squint, tracing them down the length of stone. They taper off into claw marks. You pause. This wasn't just a riverbed. It was a hunting ground. The claw marks deepen as they trail downstream until they vanish beneath a slope of collapsed stone. You kick lightly at the edge and reveal a half-buried tooth serrated thick and curved. Not a fish tooth. Predator. You hold it up and smirk. Carcharodontosaurus, you say out loud, because it's fun to say. Like a word you'd invent in a fever dream. One of the apex predators of the mid-Cretaceous, possibly rivaling T-Rex in size. Only it didn't stomp around North America. It hunted here, in riverbanks like this, through ferns and flooded basins where things moved slow enough to ambush. Historians still debate whether these riverbeds connected to a larger inland sea or were simply seasonal floodplains. Some evidence points to tidal influence, suggesting the ocean reached farther inland than previously thought. Others argue it was a fragmented series of wetlands that moved like lazy veins through a green Sahara. You step carefully across the fossilized ripples, trying not to disturb what time has already forgotten. Then something catches your eye in the corner of the dried basin, a skull. Small, round, turtle-like, half crushed as if it got stomped mid-waddle. You crouch beside it, brushing the surface with the back of your knuckles. The shell nearby is pitted, worn, but unmistakable. This was a freshwater turtle, likely eaten by something bigger, possibly super croc, possibly just time. Here's your odd fact of the day. Turtles are some of the few creatures that have barely changed in hundreds of millions of years. They found a design that worked and basically said, "We're good, thanks." Meanwhile, we humans are still trying to figure out which charger fits our phone. You keep walking the riverbed, stretching like a dry artery through the sand. The deeper you go, the more layered the stone becomes. Bands of color: ochre, iron, red, ash gray. Each one a fossilized sigh from a different season, a different century. Some layers are richer in bone. Others, just silence. You find a slab that looks like it cracked open recently. Inside a spine, tiny curve, delicate, possibly a fish or a juvenile dino. You reach to touch it, but something about the curve makes you hesitate. It's almost fetal, like a creature that never got to be. You step back. Farther along the riverbed narrows into a pinch, then flattens again into what must have once been a watering hole. The ground is pockmarked with shallow dips, footprints maybe, but they've melted together over time. Still, you get the picture: creatures gathering, drinking, waiting. And then dying? Because here's the thing about riverbeds. When the water vanishes, the predators don't. They wait. They crouch in the shade, behind rock outcrops and caves. And thirsty creatures, well, they become convenient meals. This watering hole was probably a buffet during the last weeks of the drought. And a trap. You take one last sweep of the area, noting how the stone glows in the late afternoon sun like stained glass laid flat. The ripples, the bones, the broken shells. They're not just remnants, they're chapters. They're receipts from a time when everything had teeth, including the water. You rest your hand on the rock once more, and this time you swear it hums back. Not sound, just a vibration, a pressure, as if the earth still remembers. Then you climb out of the dry bed back into the heat, and the river lets you go. Just like it let everything else go. There's something about the way the sand shifts here. It's subtle, like a shuffle in a crowd that doesn't exist. You keep walking. The air feels heavier now, thick with silence that presses against your ears. And then there it is. A skeleton, mid-meal. You blink, take 2 cautious steps forward, and crouch low. It's unmistakable. Jaws still open. Teeth sunk into the stone shadow of what used to be flesh. Predator and prey locked together like a fossilized crime scene. Only no one left a report. Just dust, and a pose too deliberate to be anything but real. You run a gloved hand along the curve of the predator's snout. The teeth are thick, recurved, built for gripping, not slicing. A dromaeosaurid maybe, or a noasaurid. Something light, quick, opportunistic. The kind that relied more on luck than bulk. The kind that died when that luck ran out. The prey is harder to read. The body's curled bones compressed under the weight of eons. But you spot a forelimb elongated with 3 fingers, possibly an early hadrosaur. Herbivore. Fast, probably noisy, and as it turns out, not quite fast enough. Historians still debate whether fossil scenes like this are staged by erosion or if the creatures genuinely died locked in combat. Some paleontologists argue that flooding rearranged bones to look dramatic. Others insist this one's too precise. The angle of the bite, the placement of the ribs, it reads like a freeze frame of something that went very, very wrong. You scoot back and sit cross-legged in the sand just watching. The skeletons don't move, obviously, but somehow the stillness feels tense. Like if you breathe too loud, one of them might finish the bite. The desert doesn't do mercy. It does performance. And this was the final act. You look closer and notice something small caught between their bodies. A fossilized leaf. Veined. Fragile. Somehow not crushed. A relic of the meal's setting. This was once a vegetated patch, maybe a shrinking oasis. Both hunter and hunted lured here by instinct. Or thirst. Probably both. Then came the sand. There's a layer of fine, compacted silt covering their lower halves. You know what that means. A sudden burial event. Flash flood, maybe. Or a sandstorm. One of those freak atmospheric tantrums that sweeps through and turns moments into memories. Here's a weird fact. Some of the most intact fossils we have were buried in less than an hour. Whole families of dinosaurs, entire nests just gone. Preserved by being in exactly the wrong place at exactly the wrong time. You imagine it now. The sky darkens. The wind comes from the wrong direction. Sand lifts like a curtain rolling in waves. The predator lunges. The prey screams. Neither finishes the sentence. Then silence. You lean back against a boulder and let the scene settle into your bones. You can almost hear it, the shuffle of claws, the slap of hooves, the final wheeze of lungs that didn't know it was over. Somewhere in the distance, the wind kicks up again and a line of sand unzips along a nearby ridge. Another fossil, not full, just a jaw half-exposed teeth like melted piano keys, probably scavenger. You wonder if it arrived too late to the party, or if it was waiting for leftovers and got buried instead. You stand and stretch the sun drooping lower behind you, now shadows stretching like gossip. As you walk around the skeletons, you notice tracks, 3-toed impressions in hardened mudstone leading away. So at least someone got out. You follow them for a bit, but they disappear under a dune swallowed by the same sand that saved this fossil drama in the first place. That's the deal out here the desert takes, but it also forgets to finish cleaning up. The bones squeak slightly under the temperature drop. Just thermal contraction. That's what you tell yourself anyway. But it's the kind of sound that makes you freeze. You glance back. They haven't moved. Obviously, still, you pick up your pace. Odd fact break. In some desert excavations, researchers have uncovered not only fossil bones but the stomach contents of the dinosaurs themselves. Ferns, conifer needles, even crushed shell bits. It's the prehistoric version of checking someone's search history. Sometimes you learn too much. You climb a low dune and take one last look at the scene below. The skeletons lied just as they did, one curled around the other forever, mid-lunge, like dancers who never got to hear the music drop. You whisper, sorry though you don't know who you're saying it to. Maybe the predator, maybe the prey, maybe just yourself. You keep walking because there's no point staying. The desert doesn't do reruns. What it shows you, it shows once. Then it moves on, buries it again, starts over with a different wind. The light is red now, rich and low and final. And for a moment, everything behind you feels still in a new way. Not dead, just paused. As if the desert hasn't finished the story yet. You wake up to the sound of nothing. Well, not nothing, but the kind of hush that happens before something begins. A breath the desert takes before telling a story it hasn't told in a very, very long time. You sit up, brushing a thin layer of sand from your clothes. It must have blown in during the night. It's in your boots, your collar, even your ears. The desert is clingy like that. And then you hear it wind. Low at first, brushing the tops of the dunes like a whisper, trying not to wake the bones. But it's growing, louder, deeper, more urgent. You check the horizon, and there it is, a smear of pale yellow rising like smoke but moving wrong. Too fast, too wide. A sandstorm. You stand. There's no real place to run. Just wide open space, and the unsettling realization that nothing is taller than you right now. Nothing to hide behind. The nearest boulder is half a mile back. Too far. So you do what any sensible person in a prehistoric desert does. You sit back down, pull your scarf over your nose, and hope the storm doesn't hate you personally. As it hits, the world turns to sound. Not howling wind, more like whispering gravel. Part of it stings. The other part just weighs down. The air gets heavy with sand, visibility drops to the length of your own arm, and even your thoughts go quiet. You hunch down. Try not to breathe too deeply. Try not to feel too deeply. Because something in the wind sounds old, and you swear it's saying names. This isn't a modern sandstorm. This is something bigger, older, maybe even global. Geologists have found layers of dust buried in ancient rock formations all over the world, evidence of colossal dust storms that swept continents clean. These events may have helped trigger mass extinctions. Not by burying things directly, but by changing the climate, blocking the sun, killing the plants, collapsing the food chain from the bottom up. Historians still debate whether the Sahara was the source of one of those superstorms. But based on the way your boots are vanishing under fresh drifts of sand, you're inclined to vote yes. It's not just about the wind. It's about what it leaves behind. When the storm passes, and it does, suddenly like someone flicked off a very dusty switch, you're coated in history. The entire landscape looks different. Dunes have shifted, bones have vanished, others have appeared. You're looking at a fresh fossil exposure. A ridge of stone cracked clean by the storm, revealing a spiral of vertebrae like some prehistoric whip. Not big, maybe a juvenile. Or just small by Cretaceous standards. You dig a little, brushing sand with your palm, and uncover more. An arm, a rib, a pelvis, and then oddly a cluster of teeth. Not in the skull, loose, scattered like dropped coins. You frown. Teeth don't usually fall out like that. Unless something else had its mouth open when the storm came. You follow the bones upslope. There another partial skeleton. Not complete, but definitely a different species. Smaller, longer tail. You crouch between the two, and your brain starts to see it, a hunt interrupted. One mid-chase, one mid-escape. And the storm said, nope, you're both done. Flash entombment. A phenomenon where a sudden weather event, sandstorm, flood, ashfall, preserves a scene so fast it feels like time panicked and took a screenshot. It's rare, but when it happens, you get moments like this, two creatures frozen in motion not by ice, but by fury. You take a deep breath and nearly choke. The air is thick with minerals and heat and something else, something sharp. The sandstorm scraped the land raw. Now it's bleeding scent. Fossil dust, maybe. Or just your own nerves. Odd fact time. The smell of rain hitting dry earth has a name, petrichor. But the smell after a sandstorm, that doesn't have a proper name yet. Some scientists say it's ozone. Others say it's decomposed plant oil. You say it smells like forgotten arguments and ancient regrets. You spend the next hour carefully circling the bones, marking locations, sketching rough outlines in your journal. You're not a professional paleontologist, but you know enough to respect the scene. This isn't a site, it's a confession. The land just coughed it up. You're just the first to listen. As the light shifts again, soft gold now curling around the edge of twilight, you see something else. High on a dune, something shines. You climb boots, lighting. It's a glassy shard, half-melted greenish, not fossil, not bone. Glass. Natural desert glass formed when lightning strikes sand. Or in some cases when a meteor hits at just the right angle. You pick it up. It's warm. Smooth on one side, bubbled on the other. You look out over the new landscape, the shifted dunes, the half-buried bones, the shadow lines now curling into the canyons, and you wonder how many storms it took to make this place forget itself. The desert doesn't just bury history. Sometimes it edits it. You stay a while longer watching shadows creep up bones like old debts catching up. Then you turn back and the path you came in on, gone, wiped clean, as if you were never here at all. You've been walking for hours, maybe days. It's hard to tell out here. Time folds differently in the desert. The sun rises, falls, and returns like it's on a loop with no real intention of progressing. But then something catches your eye. A shallow dip in the ground. Not just one, several. In a neat little scatter across a rock shelf. You stop. Kneel. Brush your hand over one of the depressions. It's circular. Too perfect to be random. Too smooth to be erosion. You tilt your head and recognize the impossible, a nest. Well, what's left of one. You've just stumbled across ghost nests. Fossilized hollows that once held dinosaur eggs. The bowls are shallow, cupped, like hands trying to keep something warm. There's no shell left, no embryos, just the impression's negative space where life tried to begin and failed. You exhale. They never hatched, you say aloud, though there's no one to hear it. Except the desert, and maybe the ghosts. You move from one to the next. Some are wider, others smaller. A few have faint concentric rings, crushed outlines where an egg might have fractured and slowly caved in under its own empty promise. One is unusually deep, like the parent might have tried to bury it a little more. Shelter it, hide it from the heat. It didn't help. Back in the Cretaceous, this land wasn't barren. These nests likely belong to sauropods or oviraptorosaurs, both known for elaborate nesting behavior. Fossilized nesting colonies have been found all across the ancient Sahara, often in exposed lake beds or floodplains. It was once an ideal place to raise a clutch of eggs, moist soil, nearby water, abundant vegetation, and then the climate turned cruel. Fast. Historians still debate whether this nesting site was abandoned mid-season or overrun by environmental collapse. Some believe the eggs were buried during one of the region's sudden sand influxes storms that came out of nowhere and never left. Others suspect the parents simply didn't return. Too weak, too far gone, or already dead. You sit cross-legged beside one of the ghost nests and stare into it like you're trying to see the moment it stopped mattering. You imagine a mother dinosaur, big, cautious, possibly feathered, pressing her bulk into this soft depression, nudging her eggs with a wide snout, then waddling off to feed. Maybe she never came back. Maybe something was waiting. Or maybe she did return, saw the cracked shells, and knew the desert had made its decision. Odd fact, modern birds, The descendants of these very creatures sometimes abandon eggs if they sense low survival odds. Instinct doesn't do second chances. As you lean closer, the wind picks up. It howls softly between the empty bowls like breath through old flutes. You freeze not because you're scared, but because the sound seems to echo downward, as if the nests are speaking to each other in a language of loss. The surrounding ground is unusually flat. It must have once been part of a greater nesting colony. Dozens, maybe hundreds of individuals laying eggs side by side. Safety in numbers. A community built on repetition. And they probably came back year after year, following migratory routes hardwired into their bones. You trace the shape of a faded footprint near one of the nests. Small, clawed. Likely a hatchling, one of the few that did make it, if only briefly. It drags forward a few feet and then disappears, swallowed by wind or time. There's no second print. You whisper, "Did you even have time to be afraid?" The sun hangs low again. You didn't realize how much time you've lost just crouching here. But the moment feels sticky, important. You can't shake the image of all those eggs, all those near lives trapped mid-chapter. The desert didn't kill them with violence. It just turned down the dial on everything they needed. Water, shade, chance. You stand brushing dust from your knees and take a final walk along the row of nests. Some are so shallow now they barely register. Others are deeper, more defined, like they're holding on. One has a tiny pebble dead center where the egg would have sat. Probably just coincidence, but you reach out and pluck it gently. It's smooth, warm. For a second, it feels like holding hope. You don't keep it. You set it back. Let the ghosts keep their stories. Here's the thing. They don't tell you about fossils. The ones that matter most are often the ones that never were. These nests are stories that stopped at the title. Lives that had blueprints but no architects, no breath, just intention. And yet they're still here, still telling you what they almost became. You walk on past the last of the hollows and glance back only once. From this angle, they look like craters, like impact scars from a quiet war no one remembers. The battlefield of beginnings that never happened. A gust of wind whirls behind you, scattering a bit of sand. For a split second, one of the nests looks full again, convex, heavy. Then it collapses a soft sigh and returns to being empty. You leave them behind, not because they're done speaking, but because they've said enough for now. You've stopped trying to keep the sand out of your boots. It's winning. Let it. There are worse things to worry about now, like the strange marks on the stone ridge ahead of you. At first, you think they're just the usual scuffs. Wind etchings. Maybe some minor erosion. But when you get closer, the grooves sharpen. Deep U-shaped gouges, repeating uneven. Too deliberate to be wind. Too violent to be water. You crouch. Run your fingers along the edge of one. It's a bite mark. Not a fresh one, obviously. The predator's long gone. But the evidence remains etched into fossilized bone. Scavenging. You scan the area. Fragments of skeletons scatter across the slope. Not a clean kill site, but leftovers. Something fed here, more than once. The marks are layered, some older, some newer. And then the weird part hits you. None of the teeth match. These aren't from the known apex predators. Not the serrated, banana-sized teeth of Carcharodontosaurus. Not the crushing, peg-like marks of Spinosaurus. These are smaller, finer, more careful even. Like something hungry but cautious. Something trying to survive without starting a fight. And yet there's nothing in the fossil record that fits. Not here. Not in this layer. Whatever did, this didn't leave behind bones. Just bites. Historians still debate whether these scavengers were juvenile theropods, early mammals, or something else entirely, maybe even a now-extinct clade that left no trace but toothprints. It's the paleontological equivalent of hearing footsteps, but never seeing who's walking. You follow the trail. It leads across a broken ribcage through a half-collapsed pelvis and stops at a stone slab half buried in sand. You brush it off and find a bone nearly sawed through. Not shattered, chewed, like a stubborn, desperate gnaw. Something stayed here, long after the big ones died. Something low to the ground. Maybe nocturnal, maybe smart, maybe scared. Odd fact break modern hyenas can crush bones to get at the marrow, one of the last nutrient-rich rewards in a corpse. Some scientists speculate ancient desert scavengers might have done the same, breaking down already fossilizing remains for the last bits of trapped protein. Chewing on bones not just days but years after death, a hunger that refused to die. You scan for footprints, but the sand is too fresh. Any evidence of paws, claws, or talons is long gone. Still, the idea clings something small survived here. It didn't hunt, it didn't roar, but it outlived everything else. You imagine it a creature crouched beside a half-buried femur, the sky above choked with heat, the bones around it whitening in the sun. Every few minutes it looks up, eyes wide, ears twitching. Every movement measured, every bite a gamble. The desert had its giants, yes, but in the end, it was the sneaky ones, the ones that stole from the dead, that lasted longer. You rise and spot another anomaly just ahead. Not bones this time. Shell fragments. Cracked spread wide, dulled by time. Turtle maybe? Or early crocodiliform. But they too bear those same shallow, focused bite marks. Not random tearing. Intentional. Almost surgical. You reach down and lift a piece. There's a groove along the curve, something tried to wedge it open. Like a thief cracking a vault. You squint at the horizon, suddenly unsure of what you're looking for. Predators are easy. They leave drama behind. But scavengers, they work in whispers. They come after the fear. They clean the stage and vanish. You walk farther, tracing the trail of chewed remnants like breadcrumbs in reverse. And then you hit something rare, a coprolite, fossilized dung. Not the glamorous find, but deeply informative. You poke it with a stick because, yes, that's still the scientific method. Break a piece. Inside crushed bone, finely ground. Some hair-like filaments. Small predator, maybe mammalian. It shouldn't be here. Or rather, it should be, but we weren't supposed to know. The problem with the fossil record is that it plays favorites. Bones get buried if they're big, dense, lucky. Soft things vanish. Light creatures blow away. But every now and then the desert makes a mistake. It leaves a clue too good to hide. You imagine a lineage of small, nocturnal, desperate survivors scuttling through the shadows of giants. Living off scraps, nesting in hollows, biting just enough to live, never enough to leave a signature. Until now. The wind kicks up again, pushing your coat against your legs, sending sand over the hill like a slow wave. You squint, and for a second it almost looks like something's moving out there, small, fast. You blink. Gone. Maybe a lizard, maybe imagination. The desert plays that game well. Here's the truth no one likes to say out loud. Survival isn't noble. It's not brave, it's not cinematic, it's ugly, it's about compromise, about teeth small enough to go unnoticed, bites quiet enough not to provoke hunger, steady enough to last after the last roar fades. You stand in the middle of a silent feeding ground, bones chewed by phantoms, and realize you're not just walking through an extinction zone, you're walking through a legacy of leftovers. You wipe your hands clean, though the dust sticks, and you move on. Because out here, even ghosts have to eat. It begins as a shimmer, not a mirage exactly. This one doesn't move. It just pulses. A silver flicker across the rocks like something wet catching sunlight. Which is funny because you haven't seen water in days. Weeks, if you count the geologic calendar. You make your way toward it, crunching over brittle flakes of stone until the shimmer resolves into something more unsettling. A ridge. Not of rock, but bone. Almost certainly vertebrae stretched out like a zipper across a fallen dune. But that's not what grabs you. It's the shape around it. There's a hollow dug into the slope, wide and almost perfect. Shallow enough to feel recent. Deep enough to be old. And in the walls of that hollow grooves. Fine etchings, almost like brushstrokes. You kneel brushing sand with your hands and realize the wind did this. The wind made art, or maybe something closer to memory. Erosion doesn't just destroy, it reveals, and sometimes it sculpts, creating impressions of things already long gone. You stare at Ocean, the patterns in the hollow. They resemble ribs. Not actual ribs, but ghost ribs. As if the skeleton used to press against the sand and the desert remembered how it felt. Historians still debate how often wind erosion versus sediment pressure is responsible for exposing fossilized remains. In places like the Sahara, it's both. But sometimes the wind does more than reveal bones. Sometimes it leaves behind false impressions, phantoms shaped by suggestion. You stand and circle the hollow, the vertebrae at its center glowing pale against the darkening light. Each segment is worn smooth not by time alone, but by abrasion sand over centuries acting like a painter's brush. Odd fact in the Atacama Desert. Wind alone has hollowed out caves. No hands, no tools, just centuries of patient gusts. Now picture that same energy applied to fossils. You reach the far side of the hollow and spot something strange. A groove. No, not a groove, a trail. A shallow, twisting trench about half a meter wide, curling up and over the edge of the slope like a frozen snake. It doesn't look like any footprint, it's too narrow, no toe marks, just drag. You follow it. It leads to another ridge, this one lower, flatter. You blink. The shape it forms, it's not a skeleton, not really. It's a shadow of one. The actual bones have long eroded. Maybe they were here 100 years ago, maybe longer, but the cavity they left behind remained. An imprint of an animal that doesn't exist anymore, sculpted by wind long after the substance vanished. Like the land is dreaming of things it used to know. You crouch in the center and lay your palm against the stone. It's warm, rough, and as the wind whistles past your ears, it almost hums. You think of all the bones you've passed, the ones exposed, the ones shattered, the ones chewed, but these are different. These are absences, the things that aren't there but still leave a shape behind. You lie back in the hollow, staring up at the sky now painted in melting streaks of orange and deep blue. The stars haven't emerged yet, but the moon's trying. Everything feels paused, not in a lifeless way, more like the world is holding a note before the next verse. And then you notice something above you. In the rock just beyond the ridge, etched lines. Sharp-angled, man-made, you climb to it. No, not man-made. Claw marks. Not new, but not fossil either. Wind has worn them, yes, but the spacing? It's off. Deliberate, repetitive. Something once used this rock, scratched it, possibly to mark territory, or to sharpen claws. You laugh quietly. Even ghosts needed hobbies. But there's something unnerving about it too. This scratch post sits high, higher than any scavenger would bother with, meaning this was left by something big, long-limbed, possibly arboreal, or just very bored. It doesn't match anything you've seen in the fossil maps. The desert has a tendency to hide its weirdest residents, or maybe it just doesn't think you're ready. You descend again, the wind now curling through the hollow with a sound like someone dragging paper across a floor. The desert breathes differently at dusk. It gets softer. Not kinder, just less eager to show off. Here's the kicker. The wind isn't done. It's still sculpting. You watch it ripple across the surface of the hollow, lifting specks of grit, shifting the outer edge of a fossilized ridge just enough to blur it, just enough to make you doubt what it was. You think of the ancient trackways, those footprints from millions of years ago, preserved by perfect conditions. Now imagine all the ones that didn't make it. All the stories that ended mid-print. All the lives that left no shape behind. And you realize out here the wind is both artist and editor. It writes. It erases. It rephrases the past in sighs and dunes. You stand brushing the last of the sand from your clothes and head downhill again. Behind you, the hollow is already beginning to fade. Not vanish, just blur. Like a face half remembered. Like a story told too many times and never quite the same way. That's the thing about memories carved by air. You don't always know if they were real, but they're all that's left when everything else forgets. You're not expecting anything now, that's the trick. The desert always waits until your expectations are dead and buried. Then it whispers something strange. You're cresting another low ridge when you see it. Just bone at first. That's not unusual anymore. You could probably navigate blindfolded by the crunch of femurs underfoot. But this one is different. The color's off darker, almost bronze. The shape, too. The spine is too short. The skull, too broad. Limbs, odd, unfinished looking. Like someone sketched a predator and then gave up halfway through. You crouch and stare. It's a partial skeleton, mostly intact, curled, as if it died mid-turn. You can make out the curve of the ribs, a partial forelimb, and the back of a jaw wide, shallow, with a strange arrangement of teeth. Long ones, thin. Uneven spacing like a comb that's missing teeth on purpose. You know your usual suspects. This one, it's not one of them. You grab your notebook and sketch quickly. You circle the skull, the wrist structure, the peculiar toes. It doesn't add up. You've seen raptors, tyrannosaurs, noasaurs, even some weird desert crocs. This doesn't match anything in the books. Historians still debate cases like this. Partial skeletons found in odd postures with traits that don't neatly align with existing species. Some insist they're just deformed versions of known dinosaurs. Others argue they're misidentified mammals or pterosaurs. But every once in a while, someone proposes the forbidden option that it's a species we've never found before. A shadow in the record. Something the sand kept quiet for 90 million years until the wind got careless. You find a scapula embedded nearby. It's longer than expected for the ribcage size and curved in an odd hook. You hold it up to the light. It glints strangely, the mineralization richer than usual, almost like it was preserved in something different. Maybe ash, maybe oil-rich sediment. You don't know. That's the whole problem. Odd fact, some of the most famous dinosaurs, Dinosaurs for example, were mysteries for decades, because only one weird bone turned up at first. It took years to match that bone to the full picture. And even then, the picture didn't make sense. You examine the spine. Short tail, thick neck, small arms but not vestigial. There's wear on the knuckles, evidence of contact, scraping, digging, balancing, fighting. You whisper, "What were you?" No reply, of course. Just the wind stirring grit into your eyes like a rude roommate. Then you spot it, a toe bone nearby, detached but close. You lift it. It's long, curved, and there, faintly along the underside, a claw groove. Not for slashing, for holding. A climber. You scan the slope. It's a rocky outcrop now, but millions of years ago it could have been forested, dotted with low-growing trees or twisted mangroves. Maybe this creature wasn't built for the chase, but for the wait, for staying still, for the pounce. You step back, recalculating the scene. A tree walker, maybe. Small, nimble, sharp of tooth, but not built for dominance. Built for ambush, for cunning. And then a chill passes through you, because this skeleton doesn't match anything deadly. It matches something clever. You close your notebook and look around. Nothing moves. No birds, no insects. Just you and this half-formed idea of a hunter who didn't roar but watched. You know how dangerous that can be. You make camp nearby, not because you're brave, but because this one won't let you go yet. You need to sit with it a while. See if the night changes your perspective. As the sun dips, you boil a cup of terrible instant coffee and stare at the bones. The light plays tricks again, elongates, shadows, sharpens teeth that weren't scary in daylight. You sip slowly. Somewhere a lizard skitters under a rock, normal. But for a second you imagine the skeleton rising, not to chase but to climb, to perch, to wait, to watch you sleep. You shake your head. Too much dessert, too much coffee, not enough sense. Here's the honest truth about paleontology. Sometimes you find something that doesn't belong. And no matter how many papers get written, how many theories get thrown around the bones, don't care. They never explain themselves. You write a note in your journal, unknown. Theropod. Climbing traits, teeth like needles. Smart eyes, probably. Died curled. Died watching. Then, almost as an afterthought, you add, not extinct, just invisible. Because out here, the desert doesn't show you everything, only what you think you're ready for. You stoke the fire. The bones glow a little in the orange light, and for the first time in a long time, you feel like maybe you're not alone. You don't remember falling asleep, but you wake to silence. Not the usual desert quiet. This one is deeper, heavier, the kind that presses on your chest before your eyes even open. You sit up. The fire is out. The sand around your camp has shifted slightly, like something dragged a finger through it in the night. You glance toward the bones of the unknown creature half buried on the ridge. Still there, but different somehow. Maybe it's the light. Maybe it's your brain. Maybe it's neither. You stand, stretch your sore knees, and realize you slept inside a basin. A shallow depression ringed by dunes shaped like a bowl, not just naturally formed. Worn, smoothed, as if something large once rested here. Something that came here often. You turn in a slow circle. The sound, or rather the absence of it, sinks in. No birds, no insects, no wind, just the sound of your own breath. You say hello aloud and the echo bounces back too fast, like the air is trying to shut you up. This is the silence basin. That's what the locals call it. You'd almost forgotten. It's not on any real map, just marked by reputation stories of fossil hunters who come here and return with nothing. No samples, no photos, just strange silences stitched into their notebooks. This is where sound dies early, they say, where footsteps vanish before they land. You don't believe that, of course. Not until now. You shoulder your pack and walk the basin's curve. The ground is fossil-rich. You see bone fragments, shell impressions, even the delicate trace of a leaf, fossilized so finely it looks inked. All of it half revealed, half withdrawn, like the desert changed its mind mid-sentence. Historians still debate what caused the acoustic anomaly here. Some blame unique wind patterns. Others point to the basin's shape, which might muffle sound like a natural amphitheater turned inside out. A few fringe researchers have suggested mineral content in the sand absorbs sound waves more efficiently than normal. You don't have a theory. You just have goosebumps. You spot a line of low rocks ahead. You climb them for a better view. The basin stretches out in wide, shallow spirals like ripples, stopped mid-expansion, and, at the center, a rise. A small hill, circular, unnatural. You make your way toward it. The ground here is firmer, layered, crusted with evaporate minerals, salt, gypsum, time. Your boots crunch, and for once the sound doesn't vanish. It echoes, not back to you, but downward. You kneel and place your ear to the ground. Faintly, faintly, you hear something. Not a voice, not a sound. A vibration, like a low drum beat. Like something tapping once every few seconds, slow and patient. You sit up, heart suddenly thudding like it's trying to match the rhythm. You move to the side of the rise and dig. Not wildly, just a few handfuls. Sand shifts easily here. Then your fingers hit something smooth, polished, stone number bone. You dig more carefully. It's a skull. Elongated, narrow, almost bird-like, but with massive orbitals, eye sockets that could have held orbs the size of oranges. You touch the ridge above the socket. It's lined with tiny pits. Sensory nodes. Heat sensors. You lean back, breath caught. This thing saw well. It felt heat. It knew when things moved in the dark. Odd fact, in some desert animals today, like snakes and owls, facial pits are used to detect temperature changes, essentially infrared vision. It's not impossible a prehistoric predator used a similar system, especially in low light or dusk hunting. You realize something else: the skull is perfectly centered in the hill, not tilted, not buried sideways, aligned, as if placed. The ground vibrates again. Or maybe you imagined it. Maybe your own heartbeat has hijacked the narrative. Still, you don't move, because something about this place isn't done with you. You stay there a long while seated cross-legged like a kid staring at a campfire, except the fire's gone and the silence is loud. Your mind wanders. You picture this predator, this sharp-eyed, heat-reading creature stalking the edge of a dying forest, creeping through the reeds, while larger dinosaurs roared somewhere else too loud to notice their own extinction. And here it stood. Maybe alone. Maybe with others. At the center of the basin, at the moment the sky changed, the rain stopped and the sand began swallowing everything. You whisper, "You saw it happen, didn't you?" The wind answers this time not with sound, but movement. A swirl of sand lifts, briefly dances around you and settles again. Just air. Just coincidence. You place the skull back in the sand and cover it gently. You don't mark it. You don't tag it. Not because it's not worth studying, but because it already knows it was here. You walk back toward the edge of the basin as twilight folds across the land. The silence still holds, but you've stopped hearing it as absence. Now it feels like a pause, a long collective breath, waiting to exhale. You climb out of the silence basin like you're emerging from a forgotten dream, one you're not sure you had, but you feel it in your bones. The sky above is bleached and blank again, cloudless, merciless. Same desert, but your eyes are different now. You're not just looking at the land, you're watching how it remembers. Your boots crunch over a new slope, one with an odd pattern to it, striated like a layer cake, each strip of sediment tilted and exposed. The rocks here are ancient, yes, but not all the same age. Some are newer, some are suspiciously familiar. You pause at a flat ledge and crouch. There it is again. A footprint, not dinosaur. Smaller, more compact, 5 digits, no claws. You sit back. That's weird. And then you see another. Parallel, similar depth. You follow them with your eyes until the tracks vanish under a curl of sand, and your brain does something unpleasant. It calculates. These tracks were laid after the dinosaur fossils. The layer is clear. It sits above the bone beds, above the nests, above the ripple-marked floodplains, which means someone or something was walking over fossilized dinosaurs. You scan again. More prints, some scattered, others in pairs. They zigzag near a partially exposed femur curve, around a dried-out root system, then vanish near a sandstone ridge. Historians still debate the presence of early mammals in this region. Fossils of rat-sized creatures, nocturnal burrowers, have been found in North Africa from the late Cretaceous, but they're rare, and their footprints almost non-existent. But here they are, right on top of everything. You whisper, you were here, you watched them end. You can almost imagine the scene. The big dinosaurs, the roars, the stampedes all crashing towards silence. And these little things, they just kept moving. Slipping between bones, ducking beneath tails the size of bridges. They weren't brave, just busy, just alive. Odd fact break. Modern mammals are descended from tiny shrew-like ancestors that lived during the dinosaur age. Some could fit in a spoon. Their secret to survival. Not fighting, not hiding, just enduring. Sleeping underground. Eating what no one else wanted. Breeding fast. Worrying later. You follow the tracks up the ridge, the angle steep. At the top, the rock changes darker, grainier. You kneel again. More prints. This time they're intersected by tail drag marks. Thin ones. Probably a lizard, maybe a small crocodiliform. But again, the sequence is wrong. The lizard prints are under the mammal tracks. You exhale. You outlive that too. And it hits you, these weren't just footprints. They were processions, post-extinction migrations. The world was resetting, and the survivors were figuring it out one footprint at a time. You look closer at the mammal tracks and notice something else: hesitation. One print slides slightly as if the animal paused. Maybe it smelled something. Maybe it was weighing its odds. Maybe it just didn't like the feeling of stepping on old bones. There's poetry in that. Even the smallest survivors hesitated on sacred ground. You stand and walk the length of the ridge. The light is soft, now shadowless. Everything looks older when the sun forgets to glare. You find another exposed surface, this one covered in overlapping impressions of fossil palimpsest. Dinosaur tracks faint and weathered underneath new ones. Layered histories. And in one heartbreaking patch, a juvenile sauropod's footprint, wide, shallow, and clean, overlapped by smaller mammal tracks. Like a child's grave trampled by time. You sit again, this time slower. It's all right here, proof that life moved on while the bones still cooled. That mammals didn't just inherit the earth. They wandered into it while the ash was still falling. They stepped over ribs. They tunneled through nests. They made maps from the ruins. Historians argue whether mammals were passive beneficiaries or opportunistic survivors. Some paint them as underdogs. Others say they were always lurking, waiting for the giants to fall. The truth is messier. They were just there. And being there was enough. You look out over the slope, your own footprints trailing behind you now. You wonder how long they'll last. An hour. A day. Could they fossilize? Unlikely, but not impossible. Fossilization requires a perfect storm. The right sediment, the right pressure, the right luck. But when it happens, even a sigh can be caught in stone. You press your palm into the ground beside a print, just to feel it. The warmth, the grain, the idea that this little spot, this random patch of nowhere, held two entire worlds stacked like forgotten pages. You think about who will walk here next. Another explorer, a scientist, maybe someone centuries from now tracing your boot prints the same way you followed these mammal ones. They'll ask the same questions. Who walked here? Why did they stop? What did they leave behind? You smile finally and rise. The light's almost gone now. You make your way down the slope, stepping carefully over footprints so old they barely know they exist. The air is cooler, the wind softer. And for a brief moment you swear the ground beneath your feet remembers you too. You hear it before you see it. A low hum barely audible over the crunch of your steps tucked into the wind, like a secret being muttered to the dunes. At first you think it's just your ears playing tricks on you, desert tinnitus, a side effect of too much sun and not enough sleep. But the sound persists, pulsing, rising, falling, like the land is trying to sing. You follow it. Down the slope and across a flat stretch of hardened sediment where nothing grows and even the wind seems tired. Then rising ahead like a hump on the back of a sleeping giant, you see it, a hill. Smooth, oddly symmetrical, a little too round to be natural. You stop walking, because now you feel it too. A vibration, not strong, just enough to make the sand tickle under your soles. The hum deepens slightly, as if acknowledging your presence. You climb, not because you want to, because you have to. The closer you get, the more unnatural the hill looks. It's not made of dune sand, it's sedimentary, crusted over in cracked sheets of ancient mudstone. Weathered but consistent, like a dome that's been forgotten but never erased. At the top, the wind hits you, and so does the sound. Louder now, resonant. The whole hill is humming like the inside of a cello being played by breath. You crouch and press your palm to the ground. It buzzes faintly, not mechanical, not electrical, just old. A frequency carved by time. Odd fact, certain types of rock, especially those rich in quartz, can produce faint vibrations when exposed to temperature changes. It's called thermoelastic resonance. That could explain the hum. But that doesn't explain the shape, or the feeling that the hill is watching you back. You circle the crest, find fissures, vents, little holes where wind escapes in quick sighs. You kneel beside one and listen. It's not words. Of course it's not. But you swear it sounds like a name. Not yours. Not anything you know. Just a name that doesn't belong to you, drifting up through the rock like a memory being exhaled. Local legend calls this place the Hill That Howls. Nomads avoided it, said it stole voices, that anyone who shouted from its peak never spoke again. You didn't believe that kind of story. Until now. Because you want to shout. You want to say something, anything. But you don't. You just sit. And the hum keeps going. You scan the surface of the hill. Here and there embedded in the crust, fossils. not complete ones, just fragments, a shoulder blade, a jaw hinge. Something that might have been an eye socket, scattered, embedded like fruit in a loaf of ancient bread. You realize what you are standing on. This isn't a hill, it's a grave. A mass of remains layered and compressed, weathered and forgotten, but not gone. Something happened here. Something final. Maybe a drought, maybe a migration gone wrong, maybe something even worse. Historians still debate whether mass death sites like this were caused by disease, starvation, or environmental traps. Some propose tar pits. Others suggest dried lake beds that turn to death bowls soft enough to swallow herds hard enough to preserve their skeletons once the flesh was gone. You look again at the shape. This isn't just a fossil bed, it's a mound, a monument made by accident. Or by memory. The sound deepens once more as if the wind has passed through 100 rib cages and learned how to play. And then just briefly you think you hear overlapping notes, multiple tones. Not music exactly, but chords. A harmony built from broken throats. You lie back against the warm rock and stare at the sky. It's all burnt orange and bruised purple now. The sun is low, dragging shadows across the land like fingers across a piano. And the hill keeps humming. Odd fact breaks: some scientists believe that wind moving through narrow cavities in fossilized bone structures can create resonance, like flutes. You imagine a storm rolling through here, filling the cavities of a dozen skeletons, creating a chorus of bone wind. It sounds ridiculous, but right now you believe it. You close your eyes and let the sound in. It's not threatening, it's not comforting, it's just there, present, persistent, like grief that never learned how to end. You lie there a long time, until the hum fades slightly, not gone, just quieter, as if the hill is done with you. For now, you whisper, "Thank you," though your voice sounds like it belongs to someone else. And as you descend, the wind behind you carries one final breath across your neck. Not a word, not a warning, just that same quiet name. A name no one remembers, except the stone. You descend the humming hill slowly, half expecting the wind to grab your ankle and pull you back. But it doesn't. It lets you go like the last exhale from a lung that finally gave up. Below, the desert stretches out in long, unbroken lines of light and shadow. Nothing new at first glance. But then movement. Something darts across a distant ridge. Small. Reptilian. The kind of shape that's part mirage, part memory. You squint. It vanishes behind a low dune. Then another appears farther left. Quick, upright, tail stiff like a rudder. You blink again. There's more of them. Lizards maybe, but not like any you've seen. These are longer, more upright, moving in short bursts. One stops, puffs its throat, then drops flat as if listening. You crouch behind a rock and watch. There are 5 of them now, darting in circles, dashing, pausing, turning sharply, almost rhythmic. You think it's chaos at first, but then you notice the pattern. They're moving around each other, spacing, displaying. They're dancing. You don't breathe for a full minute, not because it's beautiful, though it is, but because it's familiar. You've seen this before, not here. In documentaries, fossil reconstructions, behavior theories. This is ancient. These movements mimic what paleontologists think some dinosaurs did during mating rituals. Circling, head bobbing, dust kicking, even tail swishing in low arcs. You've seen reconstructions of Dinosaurs or early theropods doing this based on trackways fossilized in Cretaceous riverbeds. Parallel lines, loops, grapes. The prehistoric version of a rave. And now here it is, still happening, only in lizards, or something close to them. Odd fact. Some modern lizards, like the unnoticed genus, have complex display behaviors. Head nods, dewlap extensions, side-to-side movements that scientists believe are inherited from much older evolutionary patterns. Echoes of rituals that once involved feathers, roars, and thunderous footfalls. You shift your weight and step closer. One of them notices. It freezes. Its throat pulses once, then twice. And then it puffs up, lifts its front legs slightly, and begins a series of slow, deliberate hops, not toward you, toward the center of the group. A performance. Another one mirrors it. The two of them bounce in tandem, tails extended, heads tilted. It's not aggression. It's courtship. You're watching a prehistoric dance unfold in real time, choreographed not by instinct alone, but by inheritance, passed down through the bones, through the blood, through time that refuses to let go. You whisper, you're remembering. They don't hear you, or maybe they do, and don't care. The dance continues. Historians still debate whether trackway sites in North Africa and Mongolia show mating rituals or territorial disputes. Some think the marks are too regular to be fighting. Others argue they're evidence of display zones like ancient lekking grounds. Either way, the idea is the same: behavior survives longer than bodies. You crouch low, eyes wide, heart somewhere between awe and ache, because you know what this means. The desert hasn't forgotten, not completely. It still moves the way it used to. Through shapes, through rhythms, through creatures who've never met their ancestors but still carry the choreography in their bones. And here's the eerie part. The wind shifts again and it sounds like applause. Just a soft scatter of sand clapping across rock. But perfectly timed. You exhale, too loudly. The dancers freeze. All five look your way, heads cocked. You hold still. Then slowly they scatter, not in fear but in indifference. Like the show's over. Like you were just another passing shadow. They vanish into the rocks. You stay kneeling. Because you're not done watching. Because what you saw shouldn't exist. But it does. And suddenly the desert doesn't feel quite so quiet anymore. It feels aware. Like it's trying things out. Rehearsing. Practicing moves it once perfected. Dancing in old shoes. You rise slowly, brushing dust from your knees. The spot where they dance still carries the faint traces, tiny scuffs, tail drags, shallow prints. They'll be gone by morning. Wind always erases stage directions, but not memory. Odd fact breaks some fossilized theropod trackways. Show loops, scratches, and repeated strides all in one space, so-called display arenas. But no fossils of the animals themselves were found at the center. Just movement. Like the land held onto the dance, but not the dancers. You keep walking now, slower, as if you're stepping into a choreography you can't quite hear. You catch yourself swaying, once subtle, unconscious, matching your steps to the rhythm of the vanished lizards. And the hum returns. Not from a hill this time, from beneath your feet, soft, subtle, like something old tapping its foot, waiting for the next partner. The wind has quieted. Your feet sink softly into the sand, as if the desert is letting you pass without protest. There's a hush now, not the silence of absence, but the calm that follows movement, like a crowd has just left. Or maybe it's still here, watching from the dunes, unseen. You follow a shallow path etched between two ridges, guided by nothing but a feeling that you're close to something final. It's not a sound this time. It's not even a scent. It's the air itself, thicker, still warm but holding on to something it shouldn't. Like heat from a fire long dead. You press forward until the trail opens into a wide basin, flat, empty. But the emptiness is wrong. You step in and immediately freeze. Because everything here feels like a presence. No bones, no nests, no footprints. But you know they were here. The sand is smoothed, like something large swept across it. No edges, no details. Just the faintest suggestion of movement, curves, loops, drag marks so eroded they barely qualify as memories. You crouch low and run your fingers along a shallow groove. It's nothing. It's everything. A tail maybe, or a body. Maybe just the wind getting sentimental. Then you see it. A ripple in the earth. Not quite a ridge, not quite a scar. Something too regular to be natural, too subtle to be deliberate. A trough that loops in on itself. And at the very center, a depression. Oval. Perfect. Like something heavy once curled there, slept there, died there. But there's no bone, no fossil, just the shape it left behind. You whisper, you forgot yourself. The wind answers by not answering. Historians still debate what it means when fossils disappear, but impressions remain. There are entire zones where the bodies have dissolved, but the places they rested still hold their outlines. It's called ephemeral fossilization, memory without matter. The creatures who died here aren't here anymore. They've been lifted, reclaimed, dissolved. But their forms remain. Their weight lingers in the sand like echoes that refuse to stop bouncing. You wander farther, tracing the ghost shapes, an elbow curve, a hip line, the suggestion of jaws pressed into dirt. They weren't buried. They weren't fossilized. They melted. Time didn't preserve them. It mourned them, then let them go. And somehow that's worse. Odd fact, under certain conditions, bone will disintegrate entirely, especially in acidic soils or areas with high evaporation. What's left behind isn't just dust, but negative space. Ghost forms, the kind artists and scientists both struggle to define. You stand in the center of one such depression. Oval, still warm. You can feel the shape of it even through your boots. It presses upward like breath trapped beneath the earth. You say nothing, because this is where the ghosts forgot they were gone. You imagine a dinosaur, some tall, soft-eyed herbivore curled here in its final hour. Not hunted, not panicked, just quiet, tired. Dust settling on its snout, limbs folded, heart slowing. And when it faded, the desert simply sighed and moved around it. No bones, no sound, just shape. You realize now this is what the desert wanted to show you all along. Not death, not extinction, but absence. True absence. The kind that doesn't scream or fossilize. The kind that doesn't even remember being something else. The kind that lingers without explanation. You step away gently, not wanting to break the shape. Not that you could. It's already breaking itself. Slowly. Sand grain by grain, one breeze at a time. And as you climb the last ridge, turning for one final look, it's already fading behind you. No drama, no warning, just erasure, just the desert doing what it does best. You sit at the top and look out over the landscape. You can't see the dinosaurs. You can't see the bones, but you feel them. In the air, in the hush, in the weight of places that never truly forget. The wind shifts again. No hum this time, just a breath, soft, final. The desert holds no grudge. It doesn't roar. It doesn't scream. It just remembers softly, patiently, in curves and silences and shapes that refuse to stay buried. You've walked through its memories, bones broken, mid-meal footprints frozen in fear, nests that never hatched, and hills that hummed their own morning songs. You've seen what happens when giants fall, and smaller things tiptoe across their bones. You've listened to wind that carried names no one speaks anymore. And you've found places where ghosts forgot they were supposed to be gone, where nothing remained except the shape of what once lived curled into the earth like a whisper that never finished its sentence. This desert did not kill the dinosaurs. It absorbed them. It took in the weight of their silence and wore it like a second sky. And in return, it gave us glimpses, not answers, just impressions, like a handprint left in dust long after the hand is gone. So if you ever find yourself standing where the sand forgets to move, where sound dies early, and where even lizards remember their ancestors in their dance, know this: you're not alone. The land remembers, even when we don't.